My name is Greg Weaver, and this is ENG4E, Grade 12 Workplace English. I'd like to welcome everyone back to class today. If you want to call and join our class, you can call 1-800-465-7144, or you can call 737-4017 or 2983 in the Sioux Lookout, Lac Seul, or Dryden areas. Welcome everyone back to class today. This is our second class of the week. We need to let everyone know that our class next Monday will be pre-recorded. I will be traveling to Pekanjigam First Nations to help with the ground opening of our learning center there. And I will be away during our class time, so class will be pre-recorded on Friday. What that means is that you still go to your learning center, call in the class, join us on Bridget. It's just the class won't be interactive. You'll be able to see everything I'm doing here in Sioux Lookout and all that, but you won't be able to interact with myself or the other students. But we'll be back on Tuesday, and we'll have back to our regular routine after that. So what we are doing today is we're going to try and finish up the rest of Lesson 3. Now, Lesson 3 is where we introduce our course novel, which is The Night Wanderer. So we've already started that. We read the prologue and Chapter 1 so far. So what we're going to look at now is we're going to read the rest of Chapter 2 as well as probably all of Chapter 3. You'll have to read Chapters 4 and 5 on your own. As well, you will need to work on your double entry journal. We'll talk more about that after we finish reading. So we're going to pick up where we left off yesterday. We were just in the middle of Chapter 2. You can find that we left off at the middle of page 11 in your course novel. So a quick review of what's happened so far. We were introduced to one of our characters, Pierre L'Errant, and now we're being introduced to another character whose name is Tiffany Hunter, and we've met her boyfriend, whose name is Tony Banks. Tiffany is a Ojibwe First Nations from Otter Lake, and Tony is a white guy she's dating. So picking up in page 11, we are just a few pages into Chapter 2, and our plan is to read as far as page 30, either page 28 or page 35. So we do have a fair amount to read. So we'll get going with that. Any questions? Interrupt me, let me know, and we will get started. We'll answer your questions. So picking where we left off at page 11. So the paragraph says 2 days after their encounter in the middle of the page. So 2 days after their encounter in the library, Tiffany found Tony at his locker. She held out the root for him, neatly wrapped in a buckskin thong, except for one exposed end. "What's this?" was his predictable question. "Wicca root. Supposed to help you with your throat. Ancient Indian magic stuff." Tony took the small brown root and rolled it around in his hand. He even smelled it, and puzzled but intrigued. "What do I do with it?" "Wear it on your neck, and every once in a while chew on it a little bit of it." "Chew on it? How much?" "Just a little. My grandmother said it's good for what ails you." Tiffany stood there pleased. Normally her belief in ancient Aboriginal wisdom seldom went beyond the ghost stories told by her uncles around the campfire. But who knows? Maybe some of the stuff might be true. And she could tell by the look in Tony's eyes there was sufficient curiosity. He would remember this gift, and more importantly, he would remember her. The Welcome to Otter Lake First Nation sign whizzed by them. Another 15 minutes and she'd be home, nestled in her lower middle class Aboriginal existence. Tiffany Hunter was a band member 913, I would estimate 1100 or so. Located in the central lake region of Ontario, it wasn't the biggest Native community in the country, but it wasn't the smallest either. Tiffany had lived there all of her life, other than isolated school trips to Toronto and Ottawa, and she in the local team at hockey tournament in Sudbury. Her 16 years of existence had occurred within 45 minutes of her house. She longed to see the outside world. But until she was old enough to do something about it, she'd be content with seeing what the world would send to her. And not a lot of worlds crossed over the Otter Lake First Nations. Her cousin and best friend Darla always joked that if God ever decided to give the world an enema, he would stick the hose here in Otter Lake. Tiffany had laughed at the joke, but was too embarrassed to admit she didn't know what it meant. Later, when she asked her father, she was totally grossed out. Tiffany had always wanted to appear more worldly than she really was, but there were some things just a little too worldly. As the trees got thicker, Tiffany checked her watch and was pleasantly surprised to see how early it was in the afternoon. One of the advantages of having a boyfriend with a car is that Tiffany didn't have to take the bus home from school with all the youngest grades. Really, she should have got a boyfriend years ago, but with her father coming from a family of 9, her mother from a brood of 11, this meant a first cousin head count well over 60. Of course, it didn't count second cousins or first cousins once removed. Once those are taken into consideration, Tiffany was related to more people than worked in a Toronto office tower. It made dating kind of difficult in a small reserve. You're kind of quiet, said Tony. Just thinking. Good. Always make him think you're mysterious and deep. Thinking is deep. Deep can be good. Unless, of course, it's too deep. Nobody wants anybody's too deep. She had to figure this out later. Tiffany was new to dating and not yet figured out all of its existential aspects. In reality, it was a geography test she'd taken earlier that day that was keeping her quiet. The topic had been how the map of Europe had changed from the beginning of World War I to the end of the Second World War. More important information that was, no doubt, essential to everyday life on the Outer Lake Reserve. Nazis, Bolsheviks, League of Nations, all that stuff was, in her opinion, a waste of time. The need to know things wherever arose. She had the internet and some books, and she was sure she'd be handy anytime any Nazis or Bolsheviks came trudging through. However, just to avoid trouble, she hoped and prayed she got at least 50%. Tony had quizzed her to prep her for the test during one of the car rides. That was almost made it fun. Tony loved geography. Much like his work in his father's garage, Tony liked fixed things. Solid dates, place names, that sort of stuff. Details didn't change, yet he still needed Tiffany's help to navigate the roads of Otter Lake. Long, winding stretches of pavement, let in out of the woods, would test the abilities of any professional geographer. The way in through the reserve was circuitous and somewhat confusing to the uninitiated. Tiffany knew the road into Otter Lake Reserve better than the back of her hand. Twice a day, to and from school since grade 3. Grades 1 and 2 were taught at the school in the reserve. And on weekends, for grocery shopping, here's a movie or whatever, Tiffany had passed the same trees and curves in the road with numbing frequency. It was the only way in or out of the reserve. However, her grammar was better. Scarily better. Grandmother had once surprised her, keeping her eyes shut, describing in amazing time detail all the familiar landmarks in the road she passed them. She knew every palto, every bee nest, and every dead tree. Still, Tiffany knew far more of the section of the reserve than she cared to. For instance, she had just passed her Uncle Craig's place, the lone house in the vast expanse of wilderness that made up the northern part of the reserve. Lots of wood out front, stacked neatly by the dog kennels. He liked to raise hunting dogs. Tiffany always thought he was a little weird, just dogs and trees for company. He once hired her to clean out his backyard and shed, although she needed the extra money. She tackled the task with much enthusiasm and would be a visit to the dentist. She found a box packed with sleazy magazines sitting in the back of the shed. Grossed out, she picked up her pace in an effort to finish and get out of there as quick as possible. At the end of the afternoon, an impressed Uncle Craig complimented Tiffany on her work ethic and told her he also had a basement that needs a good cleaning. She declined, fearing what other icky things she might find down there, and grabbed the $20 and raced home on her bike, putting it behind her. She didn't like to bike this far out from the village, since the highway meandered back and forth across countryside like a confused picture. Picture an upside-down muffin, and now was a visual of the Otter Lake, a huge squarish area with a towering drumlin located just south of dead center. Invisible straight lines boxed in the reserve, established 100 years ago or so by long-forgotten surveyors. And near the south end of the muffin was the regular shoreline of the actual body of water known as Otter Lake. Obstacles like a ravine, some farmlands, a stream, and a large drumlin made a straight road into it impossible. On maps, the highway looked like a 4-year-old had drawn it to the beat of a heavy metal song. Uncle Craig's area was known as Japland, a racist name given to us several decades ago by returning war vets. It was located near the north end of the muffin. It was covered in bush, rocky outcroppings, and one large swamp that gradually drained into the lake. Really an unpleasant place. Even the crows stayed clear of it. After the Second World War, newspapers have been full of reports of long-lost Japanese soldiers hiding out on deserted islands, still thinking the war was on. It was Archie Tree who had first called the northern part of the reserve Japland. Geez, a whole squad of Japanese soldiers could living there, we'd never know. And then he'd laugh. Uncle Craig was practically the only person who lived in the area. Said he liked all the elbow room. There was supposedly more than elbow room in that land. There are also stories of monsters and demons in the forest, prowling just beyond the roadside ditch. Nobody really believed in them anymore, but the swamp-like terrain and the forbidding nature of the forest didn't make too many people want to challenge the legends. Tiffany had heard tales of murders, evil spirits, witch lights, and other assorted stories of supernatural mischief happening out there. Nobody actually knew the names of anyone who had been murdered or attacked in these dense bushes, but the stories thrived anyways. Tiffany wondered what the Otter Lake would do if a real-life monster ever came out of those woods and into the village. Native mythology was full of dangerous and mysterious creatures, wendigos, who were cannibal spirits that ate anything and everyone, spirits that took over a body and made people do crazy things, demon women with very sharp elbows and teeth and parts of the female body that weren't supposed to have teeth. Tiffany occasionally thought of them when she and her friends played video games. The monsters she often battled on Jala's Xbox paled in comparison to some of the stories she'd half heard. Luckily, the beasts she fought and screamed were far more real to her than whatever might be out there in the woods. Wasn't long after she gave Tony the Weaker root that he tracked her down inside the cafeteria near the end of the school day. Hey, that plant root thing you gave me tastes like garbage, but it works. My throat feels better already. What's the stuff? He asked. Weaker root, Tiffany responded. Wow, you should bottle it. Got any more? The younger smelled. A whole swamp full. That was the beginning. Almost 4 weeks ago. Ah, civilization, said Tony. And Tiffany giggled. The glory of downtown Otter Lake lay ahead of them. On right, they passed Betty's Takeout, the best and only burger and fries joint in the village. This western part of the reserve was called Hockey Heights because the arena was located there. This is also where Tiffany's cousin Trish lived. Right over there on the right, the big brick building. Tiffany used to be friends with Trish up until they started high school. Tiffany could also see the church at the top of the hill. That's where her family used to go to services every Sunday a long time ago. Now, for a variety of reasons, only Granny Ruth made the weekly pilgrimage, and Tiffany occasionally felt guilty of not going with her. When she was young, Tiffany used to love singing hymns with her grandmother. But one day Tiffany realized she believed in God but wasn't sure if he was doing a good job enough in her life. So rather than be a hypocrite, she decided sleeping in was a better option. Tony turned right onto a dirt side road and drove east until they reached the part of the village known as the Valley. It was there in a small gray house that Tiffany lived with her father Keith, and an oversized shoe-buying, hymn-singing Granny Ruth. It was just the three of them. Her mother, Claudia, had been gone for going on 14 months now. Left with another man, a white man, or Juganosh, as Granny would call him in Anishinaabe. Like a stone thrown into a tub of water, the action had rippled out to other members of the family, soaking each of them in their own way. To Tiffany, her mother's departure was like an early morning jump in a cold November lake. The shock knocked her off her feet. One day it seemed she was part of a happy family, though the mother-daughter bond had shifted substantially as Tiffany entered her teens. Once close, they had drifted apart as other interests came flooding in Tiffany's world. Now there were times when Tiffany could remember her mother seeming upset, distant, almost depressed. So not overly conscious of it, she felt a bit guilty for not being able to prevent what had happened. In Claudia's absence, Granny Ruth would be kind of double burden. Tiffany needed a mother more than a grandmother at this stage of her life, and Granny Ruth had struggled to be both. Her son also needed a certain kind of mothering in his attempt to understand the breakdown of his family. This was more responsibility than a woman her age should have to carry. What bothered her was that, unlike Tiffany, Keith didn't show his pain and confusion. He hid it, kept it in a place where no one could see it. So, as a result, Tiffany's father became distant and more sullen than ever, if possible. It also explained his blatant dislike for Tony. First of all, Keith had never actually contemplated the fact that his daughter would date. Like some fathers, Tiffany felt, given a choice, he probably would have been happy to reach 30 without ever dated a boy, let alone kissed one. Secondly, Tony was a juggernaut, like Claudia's new man. And there he was, dropping Tiffany off. It was like shooting up the mouth of the cave with a pot roast stuck up a shirt, knowing there was a hungry bear inside. Cool, here we are, said Tony with false enthusiasm. The car stopped in the crescent driveway of her house. It was a small, three-bedroom, government-built house typical of the community. Fairly generic, it was made of brick with two windows facing the road plus a large picture window and drawn curtains. It had a longish driveway, sheltered by a half-dozen poplar trees. Tied to one of the trees was a large, jet-black Labrador mix mongrel named Midnight. And he was barking up a storm. Midnight, shut up, Tiffany said in a forced whisper. Midnight complied somewhat, driven to a low grumbling. Tony had been here several times before. The last time, he'd noticed a scarecrow leaning against the side of the house. It was wearing the same type of shirt he'd worn on his first visit, when he discovered Keith wasn't quite comfortable with him dating his daughter. Tiffany told him to ignore the scarecrow. We've harvested the garden, so you don't need it right now. That's why I'm going to put it away in the shed for the winter. Tony also noticed the officer man was his height. Same hair color, too. Upon further investigation, Tony had discovered it appeared to be bullet holes in the scarecrow. Oh yeah, explained Tiffany. So he shoots at crows sometimes when he's not afraid of it. So he hits the scarecrow, which is strange. He's always a good hunter. Not surprising. Tony ran into the car as Tiffany hopped out. Does your father still hate me? Smiling, Tiffany closed the door behind him, but leaned in through the window. He doesn't hate you. Besides, my grandmother likes you. Tony pointed at the scarecrow. Yeah, but does your grandfather own a gun? After one of their quicker goodbyes, Tiffany watched him drive away. The evening behind a glow in her heart, and a small trail of road dust. Tony appeared to be driving faster than usual as he disappeared. Tiffany, on the other hand, found her walk to the house long and ominous. At the end of the gravel driveway, behind a screen and metal door, still showing scratch marks from the presser of midnight, a beagle named Benjui, her dog long since dead, was her family. Every time she made this walk from the road after school, she wondered what fresh new house she'd be walking into. Sometimes it lasted a while. The house had changed from a refuge to a prison. There were a lot more fights with her father, and even once or twice she caught herself ready to snap at her grandmother. Life had changed so much over the past year, it was often impossible for her to know what to expect from them and from herself. She loved them both, but Tiffany longed for the stability that disappeared with her mom. Today she was lucky. Nobody was home. Off went the offending shiny black shoes and on with the beat-up old Nikes. After that, a ham and cheese sandwich, and the last half hour of The Young and the Restless. It didn't want to end too badly. That's when she saw the note on the coffee table, right in front of her favorite spot on the couch. It was her father's handwriting. He'd been waiting for her to get comfortable. Tiffany, I moved some things around the basement. I made a little room for you in the corner underneath the stairs. Can you please move your stuff to your room down to there? You're going to be staying there for a week or two. I'll explain when I get home. Dad. Basement? Her father was going to have her moved to the basement. Like some discount fairy tale princess? Inside, Tiffany steamed and boiled and burned, just like her father, making life-changing decisions without bothering to mention it to her. Tiffany had put up with a lot, but this was way too much. There was a Dickensian quality to this letter. She didn't even know what it meant exactly. She heard it used on television and was sure it applied. The basement, she mused. No, Tiffany decided she would not move a thing until she knew exactly what was going on. The basement would wait, and so would she. About an hour after reading her dad's note, Tiffany heard his pickup arrive and Minnie's welcoming bark. There in the driveway were her father and Granny Ruth. He was juggling 5 or 6 plastic bags of groceries. It was just before the weekend, and that's when they do their shopping. On the verge of 50, he looked fit and well for his age, and liked to be more home in a duck or a deer blind than his lazy boy chair. His face showed evidence of a lot of time in the wind and sun, but it suited him, and he looked like his mother. A couple of inches taller than her, but the same laugh and slightly bow-legged walk. Tiffany was so thankful that particular genetic character was lost out to her mother's DNA. Granny Ruth was wheezing, her short legs tackling the steps with difficulty. Not so fast, you, she called on Anishinaabe, but most of the country still tended to call Ojibwe. Also annoyed Granny Ruth. What's the Ojibwe? She would ask angrily when confronted with the word. I ain't an Ojibwe. So what some white people want to call us. Even one of our words. I'm an Anishinaabe. Keith understood the language and could manage quite a few words and phrases will impress. So I wrote Ojiberish. Tiffany mostly understood what Granny Ruth spoke to her, but in some of the time she couldn't speak it herself. She knew it bothered Granny Ruth. His hands full, Keith managed to hold the door open as Granny Ruth entered, her arms wrapped around the box. Still annoyed with the content of the note, Tiffany watched coldly from her perch on the couch. Silent. She had got enough food. Granny Ruth filled the kitchen without a ton of food with potential gas like a heart without love. You always ask that. Half the time the vegetables go bad, we got so many, he responded. We can't let that happen anymore, Mom. We gotta watch our money, okay? When she started grade 3, it had taken Tiffany a while to lose a particular syntax to the older generation of our like inhabitants. She had to switch place phrases and words as he dictated. Whenever teachers had once told us, it was all turning Ojibwe thoughts into English words. The sentence structure of the two languages were radically different. So sometimes there were things that were lost in the translation, or, at the very least, rearranged. Tiffany, when angry, or just hanging out with her reserved friends or relatives, would sometimes revert to what she called elder verbiage. But she tried to avoid it. She didn't like sounding funny to her school friends. Tiffany, you home? Her father yelled. Right behind you, Dad. Keith turned to see his daughter sitting on the couch. Familiar confrontational look on her face. He's seen it before and knew it would be quite a few more winters before that teenage resistance might disappear, and probably reappear in a more mature form. But for the moment, it was sitting on the couch, calmly waiting to be dealt with. Put the bags down on the kitchen table. Did you find the note? Uh-huh. Did you do it place of the basement? Graham started taking the groceries out of the bike. I bet 2 cans of corn she didn't. Tiffany was silent. Keith fixed the jar and glared. Well, did you? No. Keith gritted his teeth. Damn it, Tiffany. Why don't you do one thing I ask you? I don't know, call me crazy, but I don't want to live in the basement. It's cold down there. There are spiders down there. Lots of them. Me and spiders don't get along. And it's musty. Dark. So, no. I didn't. She turned back to the game show on TV. The gauntlet had been thrown down and was picked up. Tiffany, just do it because I asked you to. Any particular reason for this banishment? Granny shook her head. Always with your big words. With a controlled but loud sigh, Keith crossed over to the living room and sat in his chair next to the couch. His red cheek was bouncing up and down, a slight twitch he developed recently. It was obviously stress-related, or, as he thought of it, Tiffany-related. His daughter's stubbornness made it dance like dandelion fluff on a windy day. Hoping against hope, Keith thought through a rational conversation might be able to avert yet another fight. It was a long shot, but as a hunter, he was familiar with taking long shots count. Tiffany, honestly, we need the money. With her mother gone, he was beginning to say it out loud now. Something without multicolored layers of pain, regret, anger, and small puzzlement bubbling through. There's a shared pain between them, an unfortunate and unwanted one. Tiffany herself rarely spoke of the absent Claudia unless it was asked a direct question. Even then, she kept her as short as possible. With her gone and not making enough to support the 3 of us, her job at the band has paid a lot of our bills. The last year has been tough for all of us, so I had to make other arrangements. We got to adjust, and Simi Underground is adjusting. Tiffany interrupted. How's living in the basement going to help? Is there a coal mine down there? You know I don't want that tone. Keith is young. It would never occur to him to talk to his father or mother. We're taking it in a border. That's simple. Why didn't you tell me? Why did you leave me a message with this stupid piece of paper? That's so unfair. This is so you. I did tell you. This morning at breakfast. Didn't I, Mom? Granted nodded, saying, I did wait for yes. Vindicated, Keith continued. You grunted a response from inside your magazine. I thought you heard me. It sounded like you did, so don't get mad at me if you don't listen. He did? He couldn't have. Timmy was sure would have remembered. It wasn't all like him. She usually listened. He stood up, victorious, but not particularly pleased by it. Now, for once in your life, do what you're told. Timmy didn't answer. She continued to stare at the television screen, but nothing was really registering. Her only response was a tightened shirt, sure, which did little to alleviate the situation. Still angry, Keith took a printed email, leaning forward from his coat pocket, and tossed it to Tiffany. It landed on the floor of her feet. Well, I said this morning, we're going to have a guest, a paying guest. Without waiting for a response, Keith turned and walked towards the kitchen. Granny Ruth nodded. You read that. A smart guy, your father. He went to the band office, but you think about maybe borrowing some money to renovate the basement and open one of those bed and breakfasts. In that regard, so as a guest without even trying. Somebody up there been looking up for us for sure. If this being looked after, we should see what not being looked after looked like. Trying to comprehend the change in her world, she corrected her grandmother without being conscious of it. It's bed and breakfast. The bread usually comes with the breakfast. And why didn't anybody tell me this was a master plan of all my bedroom? I did. Keith answered across the kitchen a couple of weeks ago. You did? He did? You're responded, Granny Ruth. You're too busy getting ready to go out and meet that Tony to even listen. Even my day. Cousins, boys were always clogging up your ears. That was Granny Ruth's pet name for when she was upset. It meant little girl. And she meant it. To mention Tony's name, Keith slammed cans of corn and peas into the cupboard far too forcefully, his cheeks still twitching. Granny Ruth turned the plates around. Careful, those plates are about as old as I am. Well, somebody sent one of those commuter messages thingies to the band. I was saying he was coming to the village tomorrow. Needed a place to stay. So he gives a call, and that's why you go into the basement. Keith interrupted. In any more attitude, he was sleeping under the deck. He slammed the door. Making Granny Ruth wince. Saw Matthew was going in my room. The heck with Tiffany. Looking at his daughter, Keith nodded, so anger still evident in his voice. Samantha, yep, the heck with Tiffany. It's always about you. There's no way I could get the basement in shape in time. Your grandmother sure can't stay down there. My room really ain't fit for guests. So I'm being penalized for not having a nice room? That's so unfair. Give me a couple hours. I can make your room really nice. I thought this out, Tiffany. Well, I have to explain everything to you all the time. I'm the father, you're the daughter. So for God's sake, do what I say for once. He looked at her expectantly. For a moment, there was silence. As always, Granny Ruth's find quiet was changed subject. Your father says his man's from Europe. It must be exciting. From a far-off place. And whenever he likes pash, he's poor for pickles. Granny Ruth put down a small plate of pickles on the coffee table in front of him, taking a bland yellow cauliflower for herself. One of the quirks Timmy had found puzzling is that grandma's fondness for pickles. Dill, bread and butter, mustard, baby gherkins, all kinds. There were jars and jars of stuff along the wall in the basement. Across from what was going to be her new room. She are the unavoidable. This blows. Now finish the groceries. Keith hoped to end the conversation. It's only a few days. Quit whining. You'll live, and so you can stop being so dramatic. It's just you get started right now. Sort of told his mother, said, I'll eat some tea. Tiffany looked down at the printed email in her hand. It was the second note of hers that afternoon. Neither one perked her up her day. Some stranger, some foreign person was going to be sleeping in her room. So often they said in math class, not only did it blow, it blowed cubed. At least she wouldn't be alone down there. She's going to be sharing the basement with a host of spiders. Spiders and pickles, every teenager's dream. And who the heck would stay in a bed and breakfast on neighbors of anyways? This guy was pretty desperate. She looked email red. Dear Mr. Hunter, I understand you might be such to help me. I'll be visiting our lake on the 14th of this month. I'm in dire need of a place to stay. I've been informed that you have a spare room of convenience. I'd be delighted to discuss accommodations arranged with you. I do not need much in the matter of comfort, just a place of privacy. I'll contact you when I arrive. Again, I'm in your debt. Pierre Laurent. Pierre Laurent sounded French. She hoped he wouldn't be too weird. That's where we'll stop reading for now. We're not going to get to chapter 3. You're going to read chapters 3, 4, and 5 on your own. Even though it sounds like a lot, it's only going to be 16 pages. That's all it's going to be because we already read the first 28. So what we're going to look at now, we're going to jump back into our unit, and we're going to start looking with key question 10. Now, key question 10 takes you back to the end of chapter 1, where we were introduced to Pierre Laurent. So he is one of the main characters. He's going to become our antagonist, or the person that the main character is fighting against. But the author introduces him in a way that leaves us with more questions than answers. Why does he plan his travel arrangements in such an odd way? Why did the woman next to him move seats? Write 5 questions that you have about the character Pierre, which you hope to answer as you read through the book. Copy the following chart into your notes and complete the left side. I want you to predict the answers on the right side of the chart. And we'll come back to this as you finish reading to see if you're correct or not. So think of 5 questions. An example will be, where did he come from? So think of just basic questions you have about him. How old is he? Why is he going to Otter Lake? Why does he have to travel at night? Why has he traveled all around Europe with places that don't exist anymore? Think of all the questions that we read that you may have come up as you were reading chapter 1. So write the answers on the left-hand side. You can just do it just on plain line paper. You don't have to copy this out. You can just do it just plain line paper. And then write the answers on the other side of the piece of paper, like across from on the right-hand side. And just predict what you think the answers will be. This is worth a total of 10 marks. 5 marks for the questions that you come up with. And 5 marks for your predicted answers. So you have to keep reading the rest of this section, which is chapters 3, 4, and 5. Once you have read those, there are 8 reading comprehension questions that you are going to have to answer. These are covered chapters 1 to 5. So there's 8 questions. These will be answered on a separate sheet of paper. And they have to be answered in sentence and paragraph form. Now, for these questions, writing a 1-sentence answer is not enough. You'll notice that the questions are worth anywhere between 2 to 5 marks. Because they're worth between 2 and 5 marks, you have to have between 2 and 5 points for each answer that you come up with. So if the question is worth 2 marks, try and have 2 points in your answer. If it's worth 3 marks, try and aim for 3 points. This will hold true for most of the reading comprehension questions that we are going to look at. So, if you try and do one sentence answer, you will not get full marks, and odds are I'll probably send it back to you and ask you to just add a bit more detail to it. So, the first one is worth 2 marks. Why did the woman on the flight change seats? That's from chapter 1. So think back to what we read about in the chapter. There's at least 3 reasons why she changed seats. We need to come up with 2. Number 2 is, what do Pierre's flight arrangements tell us about his character? What can we learn from him just from the way he sets his flight arrangements? Number 3 is, why is Pierre going to North America? It's very vague and not very clear why he's going there. So try and either go say what he recently gave in the novel, as well as if you read between the lines and try and figure out what he is trying to say without saying it, to come up with those answers. Try and infer an answer. Number 4 says, describe Otter Lake. In what ways is it similar to your own community? And in what ways is it different? This is worth 6 marks. You get 2 marks for describing Otter Lake, 2 marks for identifying at least 2 similarities, and 2 marks for identifying at least 2 differences. Number 5 says, how does Tiffany's father feel about Tony and why? So does he like him or does he dislike him and why? Number 6 is, this one gets into, we haven't read, this is chapter 3, 4, and 5, these last ones. Chapter 6 says, what was Darla's response to Tiffany's use of her status card? And why? And number 7, it deals the exact same situation from a different point of view. It says, what was the jeweler's response to the status card? How did Tiffany react to his comments? And number 8 says, compare Tiffany's grandmother's response to inappropriate language at the end of chapter 5 to Tiffany's father's reaction. They both react differently to her use of foul language. Looking at both of those, which approach do you think would work better with children and teenagers? That's worth 5 marks. So make sure you try and clearly explain which one you think would work better. So it leads us into our bit of our longer key questions. We'll introduce this, and then we'll touch on this again tomorrow because I won't have time to finish it. So we looked at these already in chapters 1 and 2, or lessons 1 and 2, sorry. But there are several different techniques writers use when writing fiction. These techniques include similes, metaphors, and hyperbole. A brief description of these 3 techniques follows. So a simile that we already looked already back in unit number 1 is a comparison between 2 unlike things using like or as. Some examples from the first few chapters include, when I see Tony's heart beat so hard it becomes the sound of 1,000 buffaloes stamping across the... Oh, sorry, wrong one. Sorry, I jumped in there. Examples, Tony's voice is like a sweet music to my ears, and Tony's smile is like the beacon of love in the storm of life. It's comparing 2 unlike things using like or as. Now, a metaphor is very similar. You compare 2 unlike things without using like or as. So instead, you'd have When I see Tony, my heart beats so hard it becomes the sound of 1,000 buffalo stampeding across the plains. Nothing it's like that. It is that. Another one is Tony is my knight in shining armor. Come to rescue me from my father's palace of loneliness. It's not. He is like a knight in shining armor. He is my knight in shining armor. And our last example there is hyperbole. And this is the use of extreme exaggeration. Some examples include I could sit and look at Tony's eyes forever, and Tony is the most wonderful name on earth. So with those in mind, as what we looked at back in lessons 1 and 2, we're going to look at key question 12 today. And this says, using the 3 writing techniques we just studied, you are going to complete your first writing task of this novel study. Love has inspired some of the greatest writing in the world with some of the cheesiest or the worst writing in the world. In this key question, you're going to write the sappiest, most outrageous diary entry or Facebook post ever. From the point of view of Tiffany, write a diary entry or a Facebook status post describing how much you like Tony. This entry status should be so over the top that Tiffany would be incredibly embarrassed if anyone else ever read it. Be sure to include as many details from the book as possible, but feel free to invent some of your own details. An example has been completed below for you to use as a guide. I'll read that tomorrow. And that's what we'll end for today. Everyone has a good night. Try and get working some of this work. Any questions, let me know. Call, email, text, or Facebook. And I'll talk to everyone again at the exact same time tomorrow. Till then, everyone have a good night, miigwech, and bye for now.